free on all platforms.
While touting Democratic wins in last night's election, President Biden was also asked about the 2/3 of Americans in exit polls who say they do not think he should run for re-election.
What's your message to those 2/3?
Watch me.
Democrats did lose some seats on election night, but managed to stop a potential Republican red wave. John Fetterman flipped the Senate seat in Pennsylvania, defeating Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz. Several other crucial contests are still too close to call. And the closely watched Georgia Senate race between incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker is now headed for a runoff. Our analysts and teams of reporters across the country have the latest on where things stand in pivotal races. Several candidates made history on election night, like Democrat Wes Moore, set to become the first black governor of Maryland.
Thinking about that dynamic and both the history of the state and what that does mean for the first family to look like ours in the state of Maryland, it's definitely not lost on me.
Moore tells us how he now plans to tackle top issues for voters in his state, from the economy to fears about rising crime. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis pulled off a landslide victory, and next he's expected to run for president in 2024, but it would possibly pit him against former President Trump, who's now warning DeSantis about setting his sights on the White House. Nicole is strengthening as it barrels toward Florida's east coast, leading to watches and warnings from Sunshine State to South Carolina. It's expected to make landfall overnight as a hurricane and push into the northeast. Ginger Z and Rob Marciano are tracking the storm. She's sold 20 million albums, been nominated for Grammys, and traveled the world. But for her latest act, singer Jewel is using her superstar voice to turn up the volume on mental health resources.
Misery is an equal opportunist. You know, it doesn't care if you're black, white, rich, poor, a CEO, or, a housewife.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. It has been said that the red wave many expected was only a red puddle in the end. We are now about 24 hours after polls started closing across the country, and that consequential midterm night, as anticipated, has turned into midterm week, possibly even midterm month. Tonight, control of Congress remains up in the air, but after a bitter campaign season, it appears that this divided country, the center held, even though exit polls showed inflation and the economy were at the top of voters' minds, and that majority of voters trusted Republicans to handle inflation. Democrats did not have the shellacking that polls largely suggested. Some theories as to why point to abortion and the impact of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. In the Senate, the balance of power may all come down to Georgia once again, with that race between Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker headed for a runoff next month. Nevada, the Arizona Senate could tip the scales as well. In the House, Republicans are poised to likely take back control from Democrats, but unless nearly all of the outstanding races go their way, it will not be with a large majority. And while dozens of election deniers did end up winning, voters in key battleground states rejected candidates who could have been in positions to oversee elections in 2024. President Biden spoke this afternoon at the White House and called it a good day for democracy. We have you covered tonight as results continue to come in, and we begin tonight with Mary Bruce at the White House.
President Biden tonight calling the midterm elections a good day for democracy and a good day for America.
The American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are.
The president noting the big red wave many predicted did not happen.
We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years.
Democrats today celebrating victories up and down the ballot, including John Fetterman flipping the Senate seat in Pennsylvania.
I'm not really sure what to say right now. My goodness.
With other races in key states still undecided, it's unclear which party will control the Senate. Republicans are likely to win the House, but by a much slimmer margin than expected.
It's a moving target right now, but it's going to be very close.
Still, the president saying voters sent a clear message with split decisions across the country.
I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well.
And the president asked today if he is running in 2024.
That's been our intention, regardless of what the outcome of this election was.
When asked who would be a more difficult opponent, former President Donald Trump or Florida Governor Ron DeSantis,
It'll be fun watching them take on each other.
President looking forward to that. Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. And the president says that he plans to speak with House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy tonight. What did he say about their relationship?
You know, Lindsay, the president was asked, what does he think of Kevin McCarthy? And he was pretty terse in his response. Biden said, well, I think he's the Republican leader. It is very clear the two of these men do not have much of a personal relationship. They don't go back many years. They've never really worked together closely. They've certainly criticized each other plenty, though. But the president does say, look, he is open to finding areas of compromise with the potential likely next Speaker of the House. But of course, the reality here, Lindsay, is that if Republicans do take the House, well, then the president's agenda, any policy, any legislation he's hoping to get passed is virtually dead on arrival. And of course, Republicans in the House have vowed to investigate virtually every aspect of this administration, everything from the president's son, Hunter Biden, to the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Some Republicans even suggesting they should impeach President Biden. So they are having a phone call tonight. That's a first step. We'll see where this relationship goes.
Yes, we'll be watching. All right, Mary Bruce from the White House. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you.
Now let's head out west to Nevada, where the Senate race is still a toss-up. Our Janae Norman is on the ground for us there. Janae, what's the latest coming out of Clark County?
Well, Lindsay, it seems that it is all coming down to Clark County, and this is a razor-thin race, just as so many expected. Here in Clark County, there's still an estimated 15 to 16% of votes outstanding here. The county registrar of voters, Joe Gloria, said that every vote cast in person on Election Day has been counted, with the exception of provisional ballots, those when they have to make sure that those who cast them are allowed to vote and can be validated. He also said that there's a considerable amount of drop box ballots that will need to be counted, and then there's the mail-in ballots. Nearly 15,000 mail-in ballots were that were not read last night will have to be counted today. Today, he said that USPS picked up nearly 13,000 mail-in ballots, and the thing with those mail-in ballots is as long as they were postmarked by yesterday and received by Saturday, they will need to be counted. Joe Gloria is saying we just don't know what we'll receive in the mail.
Still so close. And walk us through the various reasons why it could potentially take several more days for the final results.
Well, it starts, Lindsay, with those mail-in ballots because they can be received through Saturday, and officials don't know how many they will receive today, tomorrow, and Saturday. So those will need to be counted. There are also the nearly 5,000, just over 5,000 provisional ballots I mentioned before. Those are votes cast on Election Day that officials will need to validate to make sure those who cast them are allowed to vote. And then there are thousands of votes cast that have not yet been counted because officials couldn't match the signatures. So the deadline for that is Monday for those voters, once contacted, to cure their ballots, as it's called. So all of those through the weekend, really, officials will still be counting. They estimate it could be next Thursday before they provide an unofficial final count, Lindsay.
All right, so still some time to go there. Janae Norman, our thanks to you. Now to the looming battle to lead the Republican Party. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis had a strong showing last night, winning re-election by double digits. Meanwhile, former President Trump facing some disappointing results, with several of his key endorsed candidates falling short. So how will it impact the upcoming 2024 race, and can we still expect to see the former president make a big announcement that he promised for next week? Here's ABC's chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
Former President Trump today did something he almost never does. He admitted things didn't go well, saying of the midterms, quote, "In certain ways, yesterday's election was somewhat disappointing. But he insisted, from my personal standpoint, it was very clearly a big victory, claiming candidates he supported did great."
The numbers have been amazing so far.
In reality, the election was a disaster for Trump. At his election watch party in Mar-a-Lago, he was fuming as many of the most high-profile candidates he endorsed went down.
We want us to get some of the juice.
In Pennsylvania, Trump's chosen Senate candidate lost. So did his pick for governor, Doug Mastriano, one of the many Trump candidates who repeated his lies about the 2020 election.
We didn't win today.
And so did Don Bolduc, the Trump-endorsed Senate candidate in New Hampshire, who kept spreading conspiracy theories about the election right up to his final debate against Democrat Maggie Hassan.
We need to make sure that school buses loaded with people at the polls don't come in and vote.
You're claiming that buses full of voters who are not permitted to vote here, you're claiming that that happens in New Hampshire?
I am claiming that that is what Granite Staters tell me, and I think it's valid.
Okay.
And I believe in it.
What you just heard from Don Bolduc is his continued attempt to stoke the big lie.
This is a good night!
On the flip side, New Hampshire's Republican Governor Chris Sununu, who has called Trump bleeping crazy, won easily. And Georgia re-elected Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who stood up to Trump when Trump questioned Georgia's 2020 election results.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there was Florida's Ron DeSantis, who neither sought nor received Trump's endorsement.
Thank you for a historic landslide victory!
DeSantis didn't need Trump. He won by nearly 20 points without him.
In the end, he was able to do it without him. Jonathan Karl joins us now. So good to actually have you in studio. I think both of us have managed to get, a few minutes of sleep here and there. Yeah. So let's talk about Donald Trump. Everybody already is, he had anticipated, we thought he was going to make this big announcement last week. Then he said, I'm actually going to do it this coming Tuesday. We think he's going to announce a run for president. Do you think at all that his plans could change?
Well, they're teasing the announcements Tuesday that it will be a presidential campaign, but I think it absolutely can change. First of all, you have Republicans, some of them publicly saying it's a bad idea. Chris Sununu, the Republican governor of New Hampshire, says it's a terrible idea. I don't know who's advising the former president, but they should all be fired. But here's the thing, even some of Trump's top advisors are telling him, bad idea. Wait until after the Georgia runoff. Don't muddy that. Remember, he was blamed for losing the Georgia runoff last year. Both those Senate seats, they're saying hold off. Some of them are actually going on conservative television and saying that. So look, right now they're saying he's going to do it on Tuesday, but I wouldn't be surprised if he punts.
We know that you know the president and the inner workings, unlike many. To your question about Governor Sununu saying that he doesn't know who's advising him, can you advise him? I mean, it seems like he makes up his own mind.
I mean, that's the funny thing about that is it's Donald Trump that's doing this. It's not advisors saying, sir, you should really, announce next week. No, it's him. He wants to get this out. He feels he needs to take the momentum. He sees the criticism he's taking and he wants to change the subject. His advisors are not the ones driving him. As always, Donald Trump is Donald Trump's most important advisor.
All right. Jonathan Karl, always great to have you on.
Great to see you, Lindsay.
Well, Democrats do appear to be on their way to doing perhaps slightly better than expected in the House. The chair of the powerful Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Sean Maloney, lost his race to State Assembly member Mike Lawler in New York's newly drawn 17th Congressional District. He's the first chair of a Congressional Campaign Committee to lose their re-election since the early 90s. Lawler joins us now. First off, big congratulations to you. While this wasn't a red wave nationwide, many Republicans were hoping for. Maloney spent big bucks to try to beat you, yet you managed to win. Why do you think that the voters in the end decided to go with you?
Well, thanks for having me. Look, I think there were a number of factors, but not the least of which was Sean Patrick Maloney voted 100% of the time with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. He owns the record level of inflation that we were dealing with, the surge in crime, the skyrocketing energy prices. And voters in New York, especially, have had enough of one-party rule. For the first time in our nation's history, Democrats control everything in Washington, Albany, and New York City. And we're picking up an additional 4 seats in New York. We're going to send 11 members to Congress. And we defeated the chair of the DCCC because voters were tired of what was going on here in New York. And I think, it certainly sends a message that voters want balance and common sense at every level of government.
And you did well by campaigning on crime and inflation. A major issue for voters this campaign season was also abortion. How would you vote on a 15-week abortion ban, the same ban that the last GOP majority put on the floor?
Well, listen, I said from the beginning, and I reiterated throughout the campaign, that I am not voting in favor of a national ban on abortion. The decision in Dobbs reverted abortion rights back to the states, and in the state of New York, abortion is legal. But I think this is a decision better left to the states, and that is how I will vote in Congress.
Well, Lee Zeldin did not win the New York governor race. You won in what's been a deep blue state, and you're one of several Republicans who appear to have done quite well across the state. Is there a lesson Republicans nationwide can learn from you and your colleagues' success in New York?
Well, look, currently in the state assembly, I represent a 2-to-1 Democratic district. In Congress, I'm going to have a district that has 70,000 more Democrats than Republicans and voted for Joe Biden by 10 points. You have to go out and talk to every community. You have to, make the case to voters on the issues that impact them directly. And regardless of political party affiliation or race or gender or ethnicity or religion, if you're talking about bread and butter issues, if you're talking about public safety, if you're talking about education, every voter cares about those things. And I think we were able to relay a message to voters that resonated, and that's why I think we were successful last night.
Where do you think that the Republican Party goes from here? Many of the high-profile candidates that former President Trump endorsed are either in razor-close races or have lost entirely. Would you say that he's still the standard-bearer of your party?
Well, listen, I think for all of us within our own party, we have an obligation to make the case to voters on the issues that matter to them. Obviously, the former president will decide what he's going to do with respect to whether or not he runs again in 2024. But my focus heading into January is going to be to deliver on the issues that I ran on, and primarily tackling inflation, tackling crime, tackling energy prices, tackling immigration. We have serious challenges, and it requires all of us to focus on how we deal with it legislatively over the next 2 years. And, with respect to the politics going forward, that'll play itself out, and the voters ultimately will have their say on that.
And lastly, will you support House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy's bid for Speaker if Republicans do take control of the House?
Yes.
Mike Lawler, we so appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And congratulations.
Thanks.
Last night also featured a number of historic firsts. And for more on those, let's bring in ABC News Deputy Political Director, Miss Avery Harper. So good to see you after what was a long night into an early morning. So I know that no rest for the weary here. But run us through some of the historic firsts.
Right. In terms of the gubernatorial races, there were several candidates who made history last night. We had Wes Moore, who became the first black governor from the state of Maryland. He's only the third black governor in the United States. We also had in Massachusetts Maura Healey. She became the first woman elected to the gubernatorial seat in that state, but she's also the first openly lesbian governor in the nation. We also had Kathy Hochul here in New York State. While she had already been serving in that seat, she became the first woman elected governor in New York. And last but not least, we had Sarah Huckabee Sanders down in Arkansas, who became the first woman elected in that state. And because her father also served in that seat, she becomes the first father-daughter duo to serve in the same gubernatorial seat.
We'd love to see those history-making moments. And talk to us as far as Congress about some of those barrier-breaking moments that we saw.
Right. On your show and across ABC News, I've talked a lot about generational diversity within the halls of Congress. And so now we'll have our first Gen Z congressman in Maxwell Frost down in Florida's 10th district. He is an organizer, somebody who came from the March for Our Lives. And so he is going to be a progressive voice in Congress. We also have Becca Balint out in Vermont. She was the first woman to represent Vermont now in their at-large seat. Vermont was the last state to not have had a woman representing its residents there. She's also the first LGBTQ person to represent that state.
Lots of change and diversity. Avery, we thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now to one of those candidates marking a historic first last night, Wes Moore, who will be the first black governor of the state of Maryland. Governor-elect Moore, that has a certain ring to it, doesn't it?
It sounds great. It sounds great, and it's wonderful seeing you, Lizzie. Thank you.
How are you feeling?
We're feeling wonderful, but also just feeling very humbled.
Yeah.
I think the people of this state, they didn't just speak, but they spoke loudly. If you look at how the victory happened, it was, in urban and rural and suburban areas of the state, in Democrat and independent and Republican areas of the state. I mean, this was a resounding mandate that the people of Maryland gave. And it was a mandate that we were going to move fast, we were going to be bold, but we were going to build a state that's not leaving anyone behind. And so I'm humbled and I'm very excited.
And of course, we spoke a few weeks ago for our Race to November series where you just kicked me to the curb. You left me behind, contrary to the slogan. But I asked you then if there was a certain weight to being elected the first black governor of your state, only the third elected black governor in the country. Now that that's actually your reality, have you had a chance to process it? I'm sure you haven't even had much sleep.
We have not had much sleep, but it is remarkably humbling. You know, last night I had a chance to, in my acceptance address, I honored my grandmother, who actually passed away last week at the age of 95, who was really the matriarch of my family, and how one of the last things that she got a chance to do was vote for her grandson to be the governor of a state that she loved. And I got a chance to do that while also standing on stage with my 11 and my 9-year-old kids. And so thinking about that dynamic and both the history of the state and what that does mean for the first family to look like ours in the state of Maryland, it's definitely not lost on me.
Of course, you're a former Army captain. You, as you mentioned, ran on the military slogan of leave no one behind. I'm curious now, as you look at the economy and inflation, which was the top issue for so many voters, how do you go about doing that? How do you leave no one behind in a state like Maryland when it comes to economic security, given all the concerns about a potential recession?
I think one of the most important things we can do is make sure that everyone has a chance to participate. You know, because if you look at the state of Maryland, you know, we have 2 available jobs for every single person filing for unemployment. And people say, well, how does that make sense? It makes sense because we actually have a dynamic economy in the state of Maryland. We're just not training people to participate in it. And so it means having an education system that's teaching our young people how not just to be employees, but how to be employers. It means focusing on apprenticeship programs and trade programs and getting people in occupations that are currently hiring. It means being able to make sure that people are being paid a fair wage for the work that they are doing, and ending this idea that we should have people who are working jobs, in some cases multiple jobs, and still living at or below a poverty line. So if we can create a participatory economy, an ownership economy, where we're creating pathways for work, wages, and wealth, it's the most important thing that we can do to help Maryland families not just prepare for, but also drive through the fact that there can be some difficult headwinds, difficult economic headwinds coming.
Let's talk about crime, which is, of course, a major issue in the city of Baltimore. It's easy to identify the problem, but do you have a specific solution in order to tackle the issue of rising crime?
Yes, and the solution is that there's not going to be a single solution, but we need to make sure that the state is a full partner to be able to address the issue of public safety and violence in our society. And being a full partner means things like fixing a parole and probation system that continues to allow violent offenders in our streets and in our neighborhoods. That we have to fix the Department of Parole and Probation and make sure that it's fully staffed and funded so we can get these violent offenders off of our streets. It means working with our federal partners to make sure we're getting these illegal guns out of our neighborhoods. It means being able to actually provide resources and supports to things like our homicide detectives and people who every single day are trying to solve crimes but find themselves understaffed and undermanned. And it means being able to utilize state resources to be able to address the root causes of crime that we continue to see in our society, because while there is a very important role that law enforcement is going to play in this conversation, we are not going to arrest or militarize our way out of this. We have got to figure out ways of dealing with the root causes of crime and public safety and public safety issues and violence that we see in our society, and to be able to address it in a holistic way.
And lastly, a question about just the overall state of our democracy. We've heard so many times, you know, democracy was on the ballot last night. You defeated an election denier who the incumbent Republican governor had called a QAnon whack job. But many election deniers are still heading to new positions of power or holding on to their seats in Congress despite denying the 2020 results. Do you see that as a real ongoing threat, or could this possibly be just a temporary blip in our politics of the moment in the wake of the Trump presidency?
No, I think that this MAGA movement is very much a real ongoing threat, and we need to push back against this. The idea that somehow a political party corners patriotism or owns patriotism is something that we have to push back against, and it was something that we did forcefully in our campaign, and I won't stop. I won't stop. I won't stop, and I will not allow for a group whose definition of patriotism is trying to take down democracy, or a group who claims patriotism when their definition of it is storming the Capitol. I will not allow that, because I've seen patriotism. I've seen it with my own family. I've seen it with the people that I served with in Afghanistan when I was a member of the 82nd Airborne Division, when I led soldiers in combat and led paratroopers in combat. That patriotism is something that we must fight for and we must defend. And that is something that I think is going to become crucial, because in order for us to accomplish anything else that we need to accomplish, the basic fabric of democracy has got to be protected and secured and cherished.
We want to send a big congratulations to you, Governor-elect Wes Moore. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
It's great to see you as always. Thank you.
And when we come back, a dangerously close encounter, how a shark ended up on a fishing boat. New developments for Brittany Griner as she serves a 9-year prison sentence in Russia. What we're learning about where she's been moved. Florida's East Coast is bracing for impact as Hurricane Nicole barrels toward the state. The track includes the same areas that are still struggling after Hurricane Ian. How strong it's expected to be on impact and where it's heading next. This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House. Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5. Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me. I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends.
Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom! Now that's how you start your day, people.
Elizabeth Holmes found guilty on 4 counts of fraud, facing the possibility of decades in prison. Now we take you inside the courtroom and behind the scenes. The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes on trial. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
So, what's good to read? And we mean really good to read right now. Well, that's where Charlie and Kate Gibson can help.
Join us for the new podcast series. It is called The Bookcase with Kate and Charlie.
We will make sure you love what you read.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
After an extraordinary news-making year, and now with the historic midterms inching closer, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings.
Even though we're approaching the middle of November, a tropical threat is bearing down on Florida tonight. Right now, Hurricane Nicole is making its way through the northwestern Bahamian Islands with hurricane warnings in effect for much of nearby Florida's east coast. There are mandatory evacuations and curfews in effect tonight across that state. Hurricane Nicole is moving toward West Palm Beach with winds of roughly 70 miles per hour. Fierce winds from the storm have already reached Florida's east coast. Our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z, has the latest on the track. But first, Rob Marciano reports on the preps ahead of Nicole's landfall.
Tonight,
Angry Atlantic waves from Nicole, a massive storm crashing ashore, eating away at Florida's heavily populated East Coast.
Look at the whitecaps and wave action here on the Indian River. This isn't even the ocean, and this isn't even high tide. This seawall's taking a beating. Those houses in jeopardy. This road certainly going to be flooded tonight.
In Daytona Beach shores, officials forced to evacuate families from multiple high-rises. The properties already sustaining surf damage and erosion from Hurricane Ian.
There is a distinct possibility that one or both of these structures may collapse in some part.
Our Ginger Z just north of there in Daytona Beach.
The storm's still more than 250 miles away, and the erosion has been epic. Look out this window, the sliding glass door of a home. They lost 30 feet in just the last 24 hours. We had a backyard yesterday, we don't today.
Workers racing to try to save these homes, shoring up the land they sit on with boulders before the next high tide. Airports and theme parks in the storm's path shutting down. Nicole already making one landfall this afternoon in the Bahamas, inundating streets with up to 4 feet of storm surge in spots. A second landfall in Florida coming late tonight.
Rob Marciano joins us now. Rob, I know hurricane season ends at the end of this month, but how unusual is it to have a storm of this size? We see you already right there in the thick of things, but the size and magnitude this late in the season, and what are you expecting exactly where you are?
Well, I mean, to get any hurricane this late in the season to make landfall is historic. I think it's only happened 4 times. This is the 4th one, and I think only one other time has it hit the Florida Peninsula, meaning they've hit the Panhandle. So this is going to go down to the record books for sure. But as you mentioned, the hurricane season goes all the way through the end of November because the waters are warm enough, and Mother Nature paid attention to the calendar here. So let's talk about it. Obviously, the water's coming up here. We're on the Indian River. This isn't the ocean. This is the river. And it's acting like an ocean here as far as the storm surge is concerned. The wind has been piling this water up here all day long, and we're not even at high tide, not even near high tide. All right, the storm itself, now about 100 miles off the coast, and it's on final approach, and it's heading right for this area. Palm Beach County and points northward up to the Space Coast is where we think it'll make landfall here, really 2-3 o'clock in the evening, with winds 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. It's a hurricane now. So that's official. And some of those winds are gonna be transferred here inland. And you can see the kind of center will be heading somewhere towards Tampa and Orlando by tomorrow morning. They're gonna have the worst of it. Daytona up through Jacksonville. It will be a weaker storm at that point, but it's so big, such a huge wind field. We're talking about a storm surge that's gonna go all the way up into Charleston, South Carolina, which floods on a good day. They're going to get some flooding as well. And then as the track of this makes its way across Florida, it eventually recurves in through Georgia, the Carolinas. Oh, that was a big one. And up into the Northeast. So everybody going to get a piece of this. And the rainfall, it's moving fast enough. I think we won't see too much of a problem with flooding, but there will be areas that see some isolated flooding. It always is a little bit scary when these things come in the middle of the night, and this one is doing that. So the people that have had to evacuate, hopefully they've taken that advice. They've shut down the bridges to the barrier islands, and it's time now to ride this thing out, at least until tomorrow morning, Lindsay.
All right, well, we hope that Rob and the team will stay safe. Rob Marciano out there for us right in the thick of it. Thanks so much, Rob. Florida Emergency Management Director Kevin Guthrie joins us now for more on Nicole's impact so far and preparations for what's to come. Director Guthrie, we thank you so much for joining us. As we heard there in Rob's report, Nicole is still some hours away from landfall, but the storm's effects were already being felt this morning. What are you seeing so far?
Yeah, we're already starting to have significant beach erosion along the East Coast. I've talked to a couple of emergency management directors today who are having washovers and potential washouts of roadways, as well as breaches of dunes. And then again, we've talked about this now for a couple of days, potential homes and/or businesses such as hotels and condominium complexes that are at imminent collapse. Again, imminent being maybe within the next day or so, but nevertheless, that's being what's reported to us here in the state EOC, is that we've got several counties that are expecting to lose homes and commercial type buildings into the ocean.
And this storm system could be over Florida for several high tide cycles. What's the danger to coastal communities?
Yeah, the danger to the coastal communities is the repeating tide cycles. We're going to have 3, maybe 4 tide cycles with this storm. It's a very, very large storm, 500 tropical storm force winds, 500 miles out. So we're going to be experiencing this for a solid 48 hours. Like I said, 3, maybe 4 tide cycles. Some of those being astronomical king tides. So we're expecting that we're going to have significant coastal issues. Inland, we're looking more at a windstorm. We may have some vegetative issues. When I say vegetation, trees coming down on top of power lines and knocking power out for communities. But at the end of the day, this is a windstorm and it's a coastal beach erosion storm.
And as the storm heads north tomorrow, heavy rainfall is also expected in some of the areas already dealing with flooding after Hurricane Ian, particularly the St. Johns River. What's your biggest concern there?
Right now, all of the models are predicting that we're only going to have about 4 inches, maybe isolated pockets of 6 and 8 inches. We believe that is not going to send the St. Johns River back in a major or more so historic flood stage. We may be flirting with the major flood stage, but we're certainly not going to see the extensive flooding that we saw associated with Hurricane Ian. But to your point, it's only going to exacerbate the issues that have already happened there. It's going to prolong those issues because the St. Johns River is a very slow reacting river. It'll probably take 10 days for it to start to show signs of reaction. And then it can take as many as 30 days for that river to actually run off and run back out into the Atlantic Ocean via Jacksonville, Florida.
What resources does the state already have on standby in order to help with this recovery?
Yeah, so we have about 16,000 electrical partners that are already staged throughout the state of Florida, from as far north as Jacksonville area, Lake City, all the way down through southeast Florida. In addition to that, we've got all of our urban search and rescue teams on alert and ready to go. The Florida Federal Emergency Management Agency has another set of teams that are on alert, ready to go. Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission have all of their flat bottom boats and all of their marine vessels that are available, that are in service right now. They're ready to go all throughout the state, and they can mobilize anywhere in the state that we need them. State law enforcement, such as the State Florida Highway Patrol, the Florida Department of Agricultural Consumer Services, police, and other police agencies like Florida Department of Law Enforcement. They're all on Alpha Bravo shifts, ready to go and help us out at the drop of a phone call. So we've got a lot of state law enforcement, a lot of state water assets, and a lot of locally sourced urban search rescue team, fire teams, and ambulances ready to go for this event.
And in a state like Florida, some people there hear tropical storm or Category 1 hurricane and kind of shrug their shoulders. What is your message to residents in Nicole's Path?
Yeah, so, the Florida Building Code can certainly take tropical storms and Cat 1 hurricanes. The structures we're not necessarily worried about. But with Ian's damage, we're going to have areas that are as far away as DeSoto County, Hardee County, Fort Myers, Lee, Sarasota. Some of those more significant damaged homes may be a little more susceptible to a tropical storm and a hurricane than they would have been in the past. Again, the areas that are in Central Florida that have experienced a significant flood event and they have water in them may be a little bit weakened on the exterior shell or the interior shell, especially if they're a wood framed house. So we're going to be watching those things very closely. We're telling people, if you do not feel safe in your home, please evacuate, go to a shelter, seek shelter with friends and family or someone else. Do not stay in a structure that you do not feel safe in. Let common sense be your guide.
Some really helpful tips there. We are certainly wishing you all the best. Florida Emergency Management Director Kevin Guthrie, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Still ahead here on Prime, new fallout over a Kentucky student seen hurling racial slurs at a black student. And imagine losing more than $14 billion in a single day. How a tech CEO lost his billionaire title. There's a lot to sort through after last night's midterms. We dig deeper into the results by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. This reminder on the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, just how precious democracy is.
So much much at stake, so much on the line. More Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
What happened was pure evil.
This is one of those cases that stick with you.
They left him there to die. It was very emotional.
We don't have anybody in custody.
You felt like you needed a miracle.
We needed a miracle.
To solve this case.
You know, I need a sign.
Is this a case of divine intervention?
God loves all his children.
Even a killer?
The new 2020 True Crime Event Special, Friday night on ABC.
Zoo! 200! Oh, 200.
200 episodes of Dr. Pol. Music to my ears.
It's been 10 years, and I'm still having fun.
That rocks. He's got the moves that make your animals groove.
Now we do the dance of joy. Yay.
He's like the Justin Bieber of the
Headlining the hottest barns.
Shout out.
It's a show you won't want to miss.
I'm not going to be here forever. Maybe.
The Incredible Dr. Pol. New episodes Saturdays at 9 on Nat Geo Wild.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights. So, what's good to read? And we mean really good to read right now. Well, that's where Charlie and Kate Gibson can help.
Join us for the new podcast series. It is called The Bookcase with Kate and Charlie.
We will make sure you love what you read.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, everyone. There is still so much to sort out from last night's midterm results. So here to help us try to make sense of it all is Galen Druk from ABC's 538. Galen, thanks so much for joining us. Let's take a look at things by the numbers. Let's talk in particular about the issue of split ticket voting. First of all, let's talk about how it impacted last night's midterms, what it is.
So, over the past decades, as the country has become more politically polarized, I think there's an assumption that people are just definitely Democrats or definitely Republicans and go into the voting booth and just pull the R or the D lever, depending on how they sort of previously associated. But that is not the case. You know, we saw last night that there were a bunch of voters who cast a Republican ballot for governor and maybe a Democratic ballot for senator, or the reverse. And so there are plenty of voters out there who are looking at candidate quality. You know, does this person seem like they would make a good governor or a good senator beyond just the fact of whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, and casting votes based on those characteristics as well.
And let's focus in particular on how this played out last night in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and also Georgia.
Okay, so let's begin in New Hampshire, where the popular Republican governor, Chris Sununu, won re-election by 15 points. But if you look at the popular Democratic senator from the state, Maggie Hassan, she won re-election by 10 points. That's a 25-point gap between the Democrat and the Republican in the state. We saw Maggie Hassan run against a pretty extreme Republican candidate in Don Bolduc, endorsed by Donald Trump, and, you know, spread some conspiracy theories throughout the primary campaign. If we go on down to Pennsylvania, we saw that in that race, John Fetterman looks like he's going to win by about 3 points, whereas Josh Shapiro, the candidate for governor, the Democratic candidate for governor, looks like he's going to win by about 13 or 14 points. Wow. A 10-point gap there. I think we can say that there were some candidate quality issues on both sides there. So in the Republican side, you know, Doug Mastriano was a somewhat extreme candidate for governor on the Republican side. And then John Fetterman was also plagued with questions about his health. And so we saw that gap in Pennsylvania. And then in Georgia, you know, if there hadn't been that ticket splitting gap between, you know, Brian Kemp and Raphael Warnock, we would not see this going to a runoff. You know, Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, won outright. He doesn't have to, you know, play another day for his life. He won by 7 points. but the Senate race there is even. So Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker split. They're going to have to duke it out on December 6th. And that 7-point gap, Brian Kemp running 7 points better than Herschel Walker. I think we can chalk that up, at least in part, to a lot of the scandals that plagued Herschel Walker throughout this campaign.
Galen Druk from 538. Always appreciate you joining us and breaking it all down. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime. A lawsuit details new accusations against actor Warren Beatty. What a woman is accusing him of doing to her nearly 50 years ago. She's sold 20 million albums and toured around the world. How artist Jewel is now using her voice to amplify something millions of Americans are struggling to overcome. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
So much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
What happened was pure evil.
This is one of those cases that stick with you.
They left him there to die. It was very emotional.
We don't have anybody in custody.
You felt like you needed a miracle
We needed a
to
miracle.
solve this case.
I need a sign.
Is this a case of divine intervention?
God loves all his children.
Even a killer?
The new 2020 True Crime Event Special, Friday night on ABC.
Elizabeth Holmes found guilty on 4 counts of fraud, facing the possibility of decades in prison. Now, we take you inside the courtroom and behind the scenes. The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes on Trial. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Now streaming on ABC News Live, 2020 True Crime. Cinematic, real-life drama. Stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True Crime, 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
For the second straight election cycle, the hotly contested Georgia Senate race is heading into overtime with the Senate majority potentially on the line. Now, Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican candidate Herschel Walker will face off again on December 6th. In the battleground state of Wisconsin, ABC News is projecting incumbent Republican Ron Johnson will defeat Democrat Mandela Barn. But despite that and other losses, Democrats still defied history by not losing large numbers of congressional seats during the midterms, when their party controls the White House, House, and Senate. In Pennsylvania, Democrats clinched a victory with Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman beating his Republican challenger, Dr. Mehmet Oz.
WNBA star Brittany Griner has been moved to a Russian penal colony to serve out her 9-year prison sentence on drug possession charges. Griner was transferred out of the Moscow pretrial center, where she has been held up to this point. Her location is currently unknown. The move comes as President Biden reaffirmed his commitment to securing her release.
My intention is to get her home, and we've had a number of discussions so far.
Disturbing cell phone video taken at the University of Kentucky shows a white student attacking and harassing a black student and yelling racist remarks. Authorities arresting 22-year-old Sophia Rosing for attacking freshman Kyla Spring, who was working an overnight shift over the weekend at the front desk of a residence hall. Rosing charged with 2 counts of assault, one for Spring and the other involving a police officer. She's also been charged with disorderly conduct and public intoxication, pleading not guilty in court. Meanwhile, the community rallying around Spring, hundreds standing beside her in Lexington and standing up against racism and discrimination.
The University of Kentucky confirming in a statement that Rosing was no longer a student at the university and was permanently banned from the campus. A woman has filed a lawsuit against actor Warren Beatty, accusing him of coercing her for sex when she was a minor. The incident allegedly took place in 1973 when Beatty was 35 and the plaintiff was 14. Court documents said Beatty and the plaintiff first met on a movie set and spent time together throughout the year before he allegedly started coercing her into sexual acts. Beatty was not mentioned by name in the lawsuit, but instead as the actor nominated for an Oscar for portraying Clyde in Bonnie and Clyde. The plaintiff is seeking punitive damages to be determined by the court. A cryptocurrency crash costing one major exchange billions of dollars within just 24 hours. Concerns over the crypto company FTX's liquidity led to a major drop in its price, costing the crypto giant $2 billion between Monday and Tuesday. The sudden drop also reportedly causing FTX's CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, to lose more than $14 billion, costing him the title of billionaire in the process. FTX discussed a buyout agreement with competitor Binance to help them. The two sides had a non-binding agreement until Binance walked away from the deal after it said it conducted due diligence. FTX had reportedly been valued at $32 billion earlier this year.
In an experience straight out of Jaws, a charter boat in New Zealand got quite the surprise when this large mako shark suddenly jumped on board. The group was out on the water looking for kingfish when the shark took the bait and became hooked, and eventually leapt onto the bow of the boat. The shark stayed there for some time, but the New Zealand Herald reports that it eventually wriggled away free and unharmed, and that the charter group felt fortunate it landed away from the passengers on board.
Cannot imagine experiencing that. Welcome back, everyone. In Egypt, global leaders continue their climate negotiations as the planet continues to warm and change. Inez de la Cuetara is in Sharm el-Sheikh for us. Inez, what's the latest?
Hey, Lindsay. Yeah, that's right. And the focus here at COP this year has really been on smaller developing nations calling for developed countries, countries like the U.S. and China, to set up a so-called loss and damage fund that would essentially help them rebuild after climate disasters. So the idea here being that it's these bigger, more developed countries that are responsible for global warming. They're the ones that have really emitted the most carbon dioxide, yet it's the smaller developing countries that are really bearing the brunt of climate change. So if you think about island nations, they're the ones that are seeing rapid sea level rise. They're the ones that are dealing with massive storms. If you look at Pakistan, Pakistan is responsible for just less than 1% of the world's total carbon emissions. And yet Pakistan this year faced more than $30 billion worth of damages from severe flooding. So these countries are calling on more developed nations, on the world's biggest polluters, to pay for the damages inflicted on their economies. Now, the concern, though, the problem here is that there are still lots of questions when it comes to this fund. Who would actually pay for it, how much each nation would contribute. You have more developed nations like the U.S., like European Union nations, also opposed to some kind of fund. They've been reluctant to even discuss such a fund because they worry it would essentially be an admission of guilt and could pave the way for future lawsuit. They also argue that they have already allocated money to help the developing world adapt. Now, later this week, we'll hear from President Biden. He is traveling here to Egypt. All eyes will be on that visit to see what he has to say about this issue. And tomorrow we'll also be hearing from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Lindsay.
Inez, thank you. Selling 20 million albums, four-time Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter Jewel is an artist certainly not to be reckoned with. Now she's using her voice for a different cause. As anxiety and depression rates for Americans reach historic highs, Jewel is now looking to raise awareness and provide tools for mental health throughout the holiday season, launching the hashtag Not Alone Challenge with iHeartRadio. Jewel, one of the most iconic voices of the 90s, joins us now in studio. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me about your new music, Freewheelin' Woman. I love the title of that, first of all. What inspired it? And took a break for 7 years. So why that break? And then you said, I'm going to come back. I'm going to sing a little more.
You know, I got discovered when I was homeless, and I almost didn't sign the record contract because I knew somebody with my emotional background. I moved out at 15. I grew up in an abusive home. God forbid somebody like me become famous. It's usually a recipe for disaster. So I signed my contract with my promise I made to myself that my #1 job would be to learn how to be happy. And I wanted my whole life to be my best work of art. So the last 7 years, I've really just been being a mom. I've had a beautiful 11-year-old boy, and it's been the best time. But he's old enough now that I felt like it was time to make an album.
And tell us about your nonprofit children's organization.
Yeah, when I moved out at 15, I knew statistically kids like me repeat the cycle, and I didn't want to be a statistic. But I knew as much as I had a genetic inheritance, I also had an emotional inheritance that could predispose me to addiction or being in an abusive relationship. And so I wanted to see if happiness was a learnable skill. And so I set off actually developing tools myself to help me rewire habits. And then I wanted to see if they could work for other people. So about 20 years ago, I started working and making these tools. They got researched and proven to work by neuroscientists. It's very skill-based. And we help kids, and we're actually now one of the #1 in the world at helping kids with suicidal anxiety or ideation and anxiety.
That's amazing, and thank you for doing that, just for, you know, across society. Tell us how you came up with the Not Alone Challenge.
I realize that half the people that need mental health tools don't have access to them, and that's just not okay. I mean, misery is an equal opportunist. You know, it doesn't care if you're black, white, rich, poor, a CEO, or you know, a housewife. What happens, though, is if you're going to learn a different way of being, it takes learning, and education typically costs money. And so in that way, happiness can be elite, and that just doesn't seem right to me, especially when I know there are skill-based things, behavior-based things that really work. So the Not Alone Challenge is designed to be able to raise funds to start to scale proven scientific tools digitally.
And so specifically, what will, when people who participate, how will it help? Because this has become, and you just mentioned it, because people think, if I only had fame or I only had fortune, I would be happy then, right? But we've heard, you know, Prince Harry or Simone Biles, Selena Gomez come forward, all with similar stories about mental health concerns.
Yeah, I mean, being alive right now is causing some anxiety for people. You know, it's up across every demographic. We have CEOs that are just as affected as people that, you know, have other, just more blue-collar jobs. I've experienced it in all aspects, and I've had all those jobs. So for me, this is just really important so that we can start to put tools in the hands of people that need them and know that they work.
Can we expect from you next on the horizon, music or otherwise?
Just promoting the album for now, and then trying to make sure this challenge is going to run all through the holidays. These kinds of things tend to double. Anxiety and depression double during the holidays, so hopefully we'll save some lives this holidays. And there's amazing auction items that people can bid on, so go to notalonechallenge.org. We have like football fantasy camps and Billie Eilish tickets and incredible prizes that people can bid on to raise money to hopefully get these tools out there.
So wonderful what you're doing, so needed and necessary right now. Jewel, we thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we go tonight, the image of the day, the rising sun illuminating the Capitol building, where the party that will ultimately have control of Congress is still undecided. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of a few things. More troubles for the tech industry. Why the company that owns Facebook and Instagram is laying off thousands of employees. And Drake and 21 Savage being sued by Vogue magazine. We'll explain. Stay with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
What What happened was pure evil.
This is one of those cases that stick with you.
They left him there to die. It was very emotional.
We don't have anybody in custody.
You felt like you needed a miracle
We needed a
to
miracle.
solve this case.
You know, I need a sign.
Is this a case of divine intervention?
God loves all his children.
Even a killer?
The new 2020 True Crime Event Special, Friday night on ABC.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Hi there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. Elon Musk has sold nearly $4 billion worth of Tesla stock since buying Twitter late last month, according to regulatory filings. That's in addition to the billions of dollars in stock he'd already sold leading up to the purchase. The news sent Tesla stock prices falling to their lowest in 2 years. Police and FBI in Jackson, Mississippi are investigating the motive behind a string of fires that destroyed a historically black church and seriously damaged another. Police arrested a suspect who they say intentionally set 7 fires around Jackson State University early Tuesday morning. He's been charged with felony malicious mischief, but additional charges may be added following the investigation. The CDC is investigating a listeria outbreak after 16 cases have been reported across 6 states. The CDC is still working to narrow down the source of the foodborne bacterial illness, but they say all the people who got sick had recently eaten at deli counters. Of the people sickened so far, 13 were hospitalized. 1 person died. Another person was pregnant, and the illness resulted in pregnancy loss. We are now about 24 hours after polls started closing across the country. That consequential midterm night has turned into midterm week, potentially even midterm month. Tonight, control of Congress still up in the air, while Democrats may lose the House by a narrow margin. In the Senate, the balance of power may come down to the Georgia Senate race once again, with a runoff next month. But with Democrats facing far fewer losses than anticipated, President Biden spoke this afternoon at the White House and called it a good day for democracy. ABC's senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce is tracking it all.
President Biden tonight calling the midterm elections a good day for democracy and a good day for America.
The American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are.
The president noting the big red wave many predicted did not happen.
We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years.
Democrats today celebrating victories up and down the ballot, including John Fetterman flipping the Senate seat in Pennsylvania.
I'm not really sure what to say right now, my goodness.
With other races in key states still undecided, it's unclear which party will control the Senate. Republicans are likely to win the House, but by a much slimmer margin than expected.
It's a moving target right now, but it's going to be very close.
Still, the president saying voters sent a clear message with split decisions across the country.
I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well.
And the president asked today if he is running in 2024.
That's been our intention, regardless of what the outcome of this election was.
When asked who would be a more difficult opponent, former President Donald Trump or Florida Governor Ron DeSantis?
It'll be fun watching them take on each other.
He's looking forward to that. Our thanks to Mary. Now to the looming battle to lead the Republican Party. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis had a strong showing last night, winning re-election by double digits. Meanwhile, former President Trump is facing some disappointing results, with several of his key endorsed candidates falling short. So how will it impact the upcoming 2024 race? And can we still expect to see the former president make that big announcement that he promised for next week? Here's ABC's chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
Former President Trump today did something he almost never does. He admitted things didn't go well. saying of the midterms, quote, "In certain ways, yesterday's election was somewhat disappointing. But he insisted from my personal standpoint, it was very clearly a big victory, claiming candidates he supported did great."
The numbers have been amazing so far.
In reality, the election was a disaster for Trump. At his election watch party in Mar-a-Lago, he was fuming as many of the most high-profile candidates he endorsed went down.
We want Oz to get some of the juice.
In Pennsylvania, Trump's chosen Senate candidate lost. So did his pick for governor. Doug Mastriano, one of the many Trump candidates who repeated his lies about the 2020 election.
We didn't win today.
And so did Don Bolduc, the Trump-endorsed Senate candidate in New Hampshire, who kept spreading conspiracy theories about the election right up to his final debate against Democrat Maggie Hassan.
We need to make sure that school buses loaded with people at the polls don't come in and vote.
You're claiming that buses full of voters who are not permitted to vote here, you're claiming that that happens in New Hampshire?
I am claiming that that is what Granite Staters tell me, and I think it's valid. Okay. And I believe in it.
What you just heard from Don Bolduc is his continued attempt to stoke the big lie.
This is a good night!
On the flip side, New Hampshire's Republican Governor Chris Sununu, who is called Trump bleeping crazy, won easily. Georgia re-elected Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who stood up to Trump when Trump questioned Georgia's 2020 election results.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there was Florida's Ron DeSantis, who neither sought nor received Trump's endorsement.
Thank you for a historic landslide victory!
DeSantis didn't need Trump. He won by nearly 20 points without him.
Our thanks to Jonathan Carl. Joining us now for more is a Republican who once held the congressional seat now occupied by Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, and the Democrat who was defeated by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in a primary in New York. Former Representatives Tom Graves and Joe Crowley are also ABC News contributors. We thank you both so much for your time. Representative Graves, I'd like to start with you. Historically, incumbents after 2 years have faced major losses in the House. That includes President Trump in 2018. Why do you think in the end Republicans appear not to have been able to have that red wave that many anticipated and were hoping for in some cases, despite the bad economy and inflation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, being in D.C. today, I can tell you, after talking to incumbent Democrats and Republicans, both were dismayed at some of the outcomes, but for different reasons. Obviously, you heard President Biden say, you know, they didn't lose as much as they thought, so that was a victory. And yet Republicans expected to win many more and didn't. And so they're trying to sort that out. The reasons, I mean, are really unknown right now. I mean, clearly you can see those candidates who ran on themselves as the candidate on the issues that were important to their districts did better. Those that relied on other surrogates or other personalities didn't do quite as well. But I think the overall outcome, and I'm sure Congressman Crowley would agree, is that the American people sent a message, and that is they want to see government work again. And those who've been elected in the primaries that are coming from one extreme or the other aren't faring as well in the general elections.
Well, I'll bring that question to you. Do you agree?
Well, I think that what we saw yesterday really was two things that happened. One, Democrats were able to really hold on to what they had, primarily with some losses, no question. But the big loser here, and the big loser of the day, was Donald Trump. And I think that's good for America. I actually think it's good for the Republican Party. I won't put Tom on the spot here, but I really believe we need a strong Republican GOP. And we don't have that at the moment. We need people who stood up to Donald Trump actually won last night. And I think that's a good message for those candidates, and a message I hope other Republicans listen to as well.
Anything surprise you last night?
Just how bad Donald Trump lost. I think I was surprised about that. But also, again, that Democrats in some very difficult areas were able to hold up to the onslaught, that the economy really wasn't the big issue. You look at Pennsylvania, it was choice. And that really did surprise me, because I think all pundits, all polls were indicating it was going to be the economy, stupid. And in the end, there were other issues that really leached in there and really took hold.
And Representative Graves, I'd like to ask you about abortion. Exit polling showed that 60% of Americans support legal abortion, and voters 18 to 29 picked it as their top issue, more than twice than inflation. We, of course, saw Michigan voters vote to enshrine a women's right to reproductive freedom in the state constitution. Has your party overplayed its hand on abortion restrictions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, our party has been very consistent on its platform. It's a party with a platform, and unfortunately, I think it's been a party of personalities of recent. And the same would be true of the Democratic Party as well. But you know, when you look at the outcome of last night, I mean, Republicans still will have the majority in the House. That is a big change, and that's a big check on the Biden administration and the policies from the Biden administration. And we shouldn't lose sight of that the American people did elect to have a divided government versus a one-party rule in Washington, D.C. But as to the issue you're speaking of abortion, I mean, Republicans picked up several seats in the state of Florida. Ron DeSantis won by 20% with the Dobbs, decision going to the states. And even in Representative Crowley's home state, Republicans picked up 4 congressional districts there. So I think it's a very unique, isolated issue to districts and to states, but it's very unique to each one individually, and it's not necessarily a nationalized issue as one would have thought.
Democrats may have been able to outperform the expectations last night, but it doesn't appear that it may have been enough to keep control of the House, at least. Do you think that Joe Biden will be able to get any of his agenda through with a divided House? That
remains to be seen. What I do know is that it's going to be very, very close. We still have to wait to see what the results of the selection would be. But President Biden today actually said that he's open to work with Republicans if they're focusing on doing things that help the American people, as opposed to, I think the politics of going after the personalities involved, including himself.
And finally, Representative Graves, do you think that Herschel Walker will be able to win in a runoff? We were talking last night about how he's no longer going to have Governor Kemp to kind of help him, pull him into the end zone, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great analogy for Herschel Walker. I think he probably in his campaign believed that he performed very well, probably exceeded their expectations going into last night. Many polls showed he was going to be far behind, but it ended up being rather close. So it's yet to be seen. I mean, Georgia is a very spirited state when it comes to runoff elections. I was in 2 of them myself. So I think you'll see a lot of energy going into the state, but it probably largely depends if the Senate majority is on the line or not by the time December 6th comes around.
Former Representatives Tom Graves, Joe Crowley, we thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, we're approaching the middle of November, but a tropical threat is bearing down on Florida tonight. Right now, Hurricane Nicole is making its way through the northwestern Bahamian Islands with hurricane wind warnings in effect for much of nearby Florida's east coast. There are mandatory evacuations and curfews in effect tonight across that state. Rob Marciano has the latest from the storm zone.
Tonight, angry Atlantic waves from Nicole, a massive storm crashing ashore, eating away at Florida's heavily populated east coast.
Look at the whitecaps and wave action here on the Indian River. This isn't even the ocean, and this isn't even high tide. This seawall's taking a beating. Those houses in jeopardy. This road certainly going to be flooded tonight.
In Daytona Beach shores, officials forced to evacuate families from multiple high-rises. The properties already sustaining surf damage and erosion from Hurricane Ian.
There is a distinct possibility that one or both of these structures may collapse in some part.
Our Ginger Z just north of there in Daytona Beach.
The storm's still more than 250 miles away, and the erosion has been epic. Look out this window, the sliding glass door of a home. They lost 30 feet in just the last 24 hours. We had a backyard yesterday, we don't today.
Workers racing to try to save these homes, shoring up the land they sit on with boulders before the next high tide. Airports and theme parks in the storm's path shutting down. Nicole already making one landfall this afternoon in the Bahamas, inundating streets with up to 4 feet of storm surge in spots. A second landfall in Florida coming late tonight.
Rob Marciano joins us now. Rob, I know hurricane season ends at the end of this month, but how unusual is it to have a storm of this size? We see you already right there in the thick of things, but the size and magnitude this late in the season, and what are you expecting exactly where you are?
Well, I mean, to get any hurricane this late in the season to make landfall is historic. I think this only happened 4 times. This is the 4th one, and I think only one other time has it hit the Florida Peninsula, meaning they've hit the Panhandle. So this is going to go down to the record books for sure. But as you mentioned, the hurricane season goes all the way through the end of November because the waters are warm enough, and Mother Nature paid attention to the calendar here. So let's talk about it. Obviously, the water's coming up here. We're on the Indian River. This isn't the ocean. This is the river. And it's acting like an ocean here as far as the storm surge is concerned. The wind has been piling this water up here all day long, and we're not even at high tide, not even near high tide. All right, the storm itself, now about 100 miles off the coast, and it's on final approach, and it's heading right for this area. Palm Beach County and points northward up to the Space Coast is where we think it'll make landfall here, really 2-3 o'clock in the evening, with winds 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. It's a hurricane now. So that's official. And some of those winds are gonna be transferred here inland. And you can see the kind of center will be heading somewhere towards Tampa and Orlando by tomorrow morning. They're gonna have the worst of it. Daytona up to Jacksonville. It will be a weaker storm at that point, but it's so big, such a huge wind field. We're talking about a storm surge that's gonna go all the way up into Charleston, South Carolina, which floods on a good day. They're going to get some flooding as well. And then as the track of this makes its way across Florida, it eventually recurves into Georgia, the Carolinas. Oh, that was a big one. And up into the Northeast. So everybody going to get a piece of this. And the rainfall, it's moving fast enough. I think we won't see too much of a problem with flooding, but there will be areas that see some isolated flooding. It always is a little bit scary when these things come in the middle of the night, and this one is doing that. So the people that have had to evacuate, hopefully they've taken that advice. They've shut down the bridges to the barrier islands, and it's time now to ride this thing out, at least until tomorrow morning, Lindsay.
All right, well, we hope that Rob and the team will stay safe. Rob Marciano out there for us right in the thick of it. Thanks so much, Rob. We head overseas now to the war in Ukraine and Russia's announcement of a major retreat of his troops from the key Ukrainian city of Kherson. But many Ukrainians aren't declaring it a complete win yet and fear that it could be another trap by Putin. ABC's James Longman is with some troops in Ukraine and joins us tonight.
Tonight, the most significant Russian retreat in Ukraine in months. The southern city of Kherson has been occupied since February. It's the largest city in Russian hands and the only regional capital. But now Putin's troops may be set to leave. This top Russian commander saying it's a difficult decision, but will preserve his forces. Ukraine is urging caution tonight. A top aide for Zelensky saying, "We see no signs that Russia is leaving Kherson without a fight." But if they do pull back, it would be the biggest setback for Putin since his forces were pushed out from around Kyiv early in this war. Ukrainian forces have been bearing down on Kherson for weeks. We were with a tank battalion north of the city today.
Ukraine has been edging closer and closer to Kherson, and they're hoping that these tanks will one day be able to roll into the city.
We meet a gunner just returned from the front who says the Russians are avoiding direct engagements and relying more on artillery.
Because they're scared of you.
Я не знаю причини, ну, ймовірно, що так. Більше всього.
Well, I don't know the reasons, but probably, yeah, they're just scared of us.
The fight for this region has been brutal. We meet Ivan and Olena Chapak, their home of 32 years destroyed by 3 Russian missiles. It was also beautiful, says Olena, flowers everywhere, but now look what they've done. Before we leave, Ivan stops me, trying to hold back tears. Thank you for the help provided by the American people and the American president.
Such heartfelt gratitude there. Our thanks to James Longman for that. Mega layoffs at Meta after the tech titan announced that it plans on laying off thousands. The news comes after a ruthless year where the company has seen a 70% decline in its stock just since January. ABC's Matt Gutman has the details.
Tonight, Facebook parent company Meta, the tech Goliath, which seemed only capable of growing, now laying off 11,000 employees. That's about 13% of Meta's total workforce, the largest staff cut in the company's history. In a letter to employees, CEO Mark Zuckerberg saying he's sorry to those impacted, and in a video obtained by NBC addressing the layoffs to employees virtually.
I'm the founder and CEO. I'm responsible for the health of our company, for our direction. It was, one of the hardest calls that I've had to make in the 18 years of running the company.
Zuckerberg admitting he overhired as e-commerce surged during the COVID pandemic, telling employees, "I got this wrong."
I think the clock has struck midnight for Facebook, and ultimately the metaverse strategy
has been a disaster of epic proportions.
Meta's announcement comes after a number of high-profile tech companies laid off workers this year, including Netflix, Lyft, and Snap. And just last week, new Twitter CEO Elon Musk cutting roughly half the company's 7,500 employees.
Matt Gutman joins us now. And Matt, how much has Meta lost recently? Why is this all part of a bigger concern?
An astounding amount of money, Lindsay, about $700 billion in market value just over the past several months. That is the largest amount of market value ever lost by any company in history. Its stock did rally today, but it's a major concern because what we're seeing are mass layoffs at some of America's biggest corporations, and the analysts and economists with whom we spoke today said that we're likely going to see more of that from other companies, and that might mean that a recession at this point is maybe inevitable. Lindsay.
Oh, well. All right. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you as always. Still to come, what a protester threw at King Charles and Queen Camilla as they made a visit to a UK city, and why Vogue magazine is suing rappers Drake and 21 Savage for millions.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
After an extraordinary news-making year, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings.
From the giant sequoias to the waterfalls, it's an amazing place. But in Yosemite, criminals go on vacation too. A park ranger found partial human remains.
It was a human hand.
That opened the possibility of suspects.
Henry Lee Lucas. Carrie Stainer. Donald Gibson.
Any of them could have done it.
We're gonna figure this thing out.
Wild Crime, Season 2, Murder in Yosemite. Now streaming only on Hulu.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
what is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Welcome back. We're tracking several headlines around the world. In Berlin, a former airport is being turned into a temporary refugee shelter with 3,600 beds. The city is struggling to support the growing tide of Ukrainians fleeing ahead of winter. Germany has taken in 1 million refugees from Ukraine since the start of the war. An 8th journalist has been killed in Haiti this year. The man worked for one of the country's top streaming radio stations. He was shot to death near his home in a Port-au-Prince neighborhood that has seen escalating gang violence. And in the UK, a protester threw eggs and insults at King Charles and his wife during a visit to the city of York. Police wrestled the man to the ground and arrested him. He was heard shouting, quote, "This country was built on the blood of slaves." As he was being detained, the eggs appeared to miss the king. Fresh off the release of their hit new album, 2 rappers are facing a massive lawsuit. Drake and 21 Savage are being sued for millions by Vogue magazine. ABC's Ariel Reshev has the details.
I hate a privileged rapper who ain't had a hit since he signed.
Drake and 21 Savage hit with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from publishing behemoth Condé Nast.
Don't tell me that you matter if you ain't been in Vogue.
The artist promoting their new album, Her Loss, with this fake cover of Vogue. Drake posting it to social media with the caption, "Me and my brother on newsstands tomorrow. Thanks Vogue magazine and Anna Wintour for the love and support on this historic moment." But now, Condé Nast, which owns the fashion mag, saying the image was never authorized, calling the cover false, filing a trademark infringement lawsuit seeking at least $4 million in damages. The company claiming Vogue magazine and its editor-in-chief, Anna Wintour, have had no involvement in Her Loss or its promotion and have not endorsed it in any way. Nor did Condé Nast authorize, much less support, the creation and widespread dissemination of a counterfeit issue of Vogue, or a counterfeit version of perhaps one of the most carefully curated covers in all of the publication business in service of promoting defendants' new album.
Some may look at it as being genius.
Others may think that it's a little bit too edgy. So it's important for, creatives and artists alike to be mindful of what they're putting out there, to ensure that they own the rights and whatever they're putting out there for their audience to digest.
Condé Nast alleging the magazine was a reprint of a previous issue of Vogue, with modified pages including superimposed promotional logos or images of Anna Wintour photoshopped with Drake.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting your musical guest for the evening, Drake and 21 Savage.
The cover is just one of multiple stunts the pair has released as part of the album's promotion. From this Saturday Night Live segment,
I can't right my wrongs, but I can still right these hoods,
to a spot on NPR's Tiny Desk concert.
This is our tiny desk. Let's get it.
To an interview on The Howard Stern Show.
I feel like we're all gonna need something real.
All not real.
Our thanks to Ariel for that. The lawsuit is seeking at least $4 million in damage or triple the defendants' profits from their album and the counterfeit magazine, whichever is higher. Vogue also wants the fake magazine to be removed from the rapper's social media and websites. We reached out. So far, Drake and 21 Savage are not commenting. And still to come, a surprise reunion for a new police officer at her graduation. How their encounter when she was just 6 weeks old set her on a path to law enforcement.
What happened was pure evil.
This is one of those cases that stick with you.
They left him there to die. It was very emotional.
We don't have anybody in custody.
You felt like you needed a miracle
We needed a
to
miracle.
solve this case.
You know, I need a sign.
Is this a case of divine intervention?
God loves all his children.
Even a killer?
The new 2020 True Crime Event Special, Friday night on ABC. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir. America's #1 most watched newscast. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Wait a minute. You mean now I can listen to both GMA and GMA3 any time of the day, anywhere?
Listen to GMA and GMA3
What you need to know.
on the go, served up to you daily.
Listen to the Good Morning America podcast wherever you get your podcast.
Thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday morning.
Back in 2000, an Escondido, California officer saved the life of a 6-week-old baby. Now, 22 years later, that baby girl is becoming a police officer herself, and the man who rescued her was there for the ceremony. Reporter Madison Weil from our partner station KGTV was there for that surprise of a lifetime.
My mom came up to me and she was like, I have some news for you. And she sat me down. She was like, I found the officer that saved your life. And my face, I literally was like,
This is Natalie Young with her loving adoptive parents, Jeff and Shelley. She always knew a police officer had saved her as a baby and always wanted a career in law enforcement because of him. But she had never met him until her mom shocked her with the news. She found him and he'd be flying out to her Sheriff's Academy graduation.
when I tell you, I couldn't even speak. I was like, what? He's coming to my graduation. She's like, he's going to pin the badge on you.
We caught up with Sergeant Valdivia. He still remembers the day 22 years ago. He responded to a house in South Escondido and found baby Natalie on a bed with a meth pipe nearby.
She was underweight, and of course the house was a mess.
Natalie was placed in protective custody and adopted on New Year's Day. Fast forward to this year, a reunion neither thought would ever happen.
I could never re-experience that feeling.
The feeling of thanking Sergeant Valdivia in person right before he pinned her badge at graduation.
The whole time I was holding back tears at graduation and I couldn't stop smiling. My cheeks were hurting.
Just being invited to her graduation was a huge honor, but being asked to pin her badge on was definitely a career highlight for me. You can just tell she cares about people. I think she's gonna make a great cop.
What a reunion and heartwarming story. That is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change.